I was standing in line at the bank when my entire world cracked in half. "Sorry, Ms. Rowan," the clerk said, frowning at the screen. "We can't approve this transaction without the second signature. The account requires dual authorization now." I blinked. "What second signature? This is my business account. I've run this company solo for 10 years. There's no one else." He turned the screen slightly, his tone apologetic. "According to our system, Ms. Leona Rowan was added as co-owner of the account 3 months ago." My blood turned to ice. Leona. My younger sister. The one who hadn't lifted a finger to help since our dad died. The one who'd been finding herself for the past 5 years, hopping from yoga retreats in Bali to failed Etsy candle shops. The one who'd once said she was glad she wasn't stuck managing a dusty old warehouse full of boring equipment like I was. My name is Valerie Rowan. I'm 39 years old. And up until that moment, I believed that hard work, loyalty, and family meant something. Leona had always been the golden child. Our dad adored her. Mom did too, in that quiet, blind way that meant Leona never had to be responsible for anything. I was the planner, the fixer, the one who made the world keep spinning while she floated around it like a glittery balloon. When Dad passed away, it was me who took over the family's audiovisual supply business. I learned everything from scratch. Built up our client base. Pulled us through COVID. Even took out a second mortgage to keep our staff paid. Leona, meanwhile, sent me a postcard from Tulum. I stared at the screen. Her name was right there. Leona Rowan. Co-owner. There must be a mistake, I muttered, reaching for my phone. But even as I said it, the pieces were already falling into place. A weird call from our old family lawyer 2 months back, asking if I'd reviewed the business paperwork Dad supposedly updated before he died. A few strange mail deliveries I assumed were spam. And the day Leona visited out of nowhere with pastries, acting unusually sweet. I'd been played. By the time I drove back to the office, the shock had hardened into something else, fury. I stormed inside, ignoring Ben's wave from the front desk. My hands were trembling as I yanked open the file cabinet in my office and started flipping through folders. It didn't take long to find the one labeled ownership transfer. There it was. A signed agreement, notarized. My father's signature. Mine. And Leona's. Only I had never signed it. I dropped into my chair, feeling like I was falling. The signature wasn't mine. It looked like mine. Close enough to pass a quick glance. But it wasn't. And Dad, God, why would he do this? Or had he? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Leona. "Hey sis. So excited to chat soon. I have a few ideas for revamping the business, thinking we go more boutique, maybe add an event planning branch. Anyway, let's meet this week, yeah. Hugs and kisses." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. She knew. She wasn't confused or misinformed. She knew exactly what she'd done. And she thought she'd get away with it. I called my attorney, Miriam, who had helped me draft all my contracts since the beginning. She answered on the second ring. "Valerie? Everything okay?" "No. Leona somehow got herself listed as co-owner of the company. She has access to the accounts. And there's a document with my forged signature." Silence. Then, a low whistle. "You're sure it's forged?" "Positive. I never signed anything. And my dad. I don't think he would have either. Not unless she manipulated him while he was sick." Miriam's tone sharpened. "Okay. We'll need to move fast. If she used a forged signature and notarized it, that's fraud. We'll get a handwriting analyst. Meanwhile, don't confront her yet. Let her think you're unaware. The more she talks, the better. I ended the call with my heart racing. Fraud. That word made me feel a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't powerless. But I still had to know how deep this betrayal went. I pulled up the company's financials. Within minutes, I found several transfers, small enough not to flag our accountant, but large enough to add up. Thousands siphoned off into a new consulting firm called LNR Creative Ventures. Leona and Rachel. Her best friend from college. I remembered Rachel. She once tried to convince me to let her run a rebrand, which would have cost tens of thousands and replaced our entire inventory with eco-minimalist packaging. I'd politely declined. Apparently, they'd decided to do it without me. I sat back in my chair, shaking. She hadn't just stolen part of my business. She was planning to remake it in her own image. I looked around my office, at the shelves I'd built, the signed supplier contracts I'd negotiated, the framed photo of me and Dad in front of the warehouse on the day I officially became CEO. No. Not without a fight. She wanted a war. Fine. She just picked the wrong sister to mess with. For the next 3 days, I said nothing. I acted normal. I smiled when Leona dropped by the office unannounced, wearing her ridiculous straw hat and floral maxi dress, clutching an iPad like it gave her credibility. She prattled on about brand evolution and her vision for rebranding us as an immersive event solutions hub. I nodded and took notes, pretending to be intrigued, while secretly documenting every stupid idea she proposed. I even managed a polite laugh when she said, "You're the backbone, Val, but I'm the vibe." I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Because Miriam had arranged for a forensic document examiner to look at the signature. We were collecting bank records, cross-referencing the IP address from the notarized digital submission. Every move I made now had to be calculated. Leona, meanwhile, kept texting Rachel during meetings. At one point, she even took a call on speaker in the office kitchen, loudly discussing vision boards and synergy options. Ben, my operations manager, pulled me aside after she left. "Hey, is she serious about changing our supplier contracts?" Because she mentioned canceling with Dino AV and they're our biggest account. I shook my head. Don't worry. Just let her talk. Nothing is changing. Not yet. But the truth was, I didn't know how long I could keep her from blowing everything up. Friday afternoon, Miriam called. The analyst confirmed it, Val. The signature on the transfer document is a forgery. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Good. What's next? We file for an injunction first thing Monday. But there's more. I checked the witness notary who signed off on the document. She's real, but get this, she's Rachel's cousin. I stood up so fast my chair tipped. You're kidding. Nope. We have her LinkedIn. We're compiling the connections now. If we prove conspiracy between Leona and Rachel, this escalates from fraud to criminal conspiracy. I stared out the window at the parking lot, my jaw clenched. Let's bury them. Miriam didn't hesitate. Already started. I ended the call and stared down at my desk, at a stack of order forms and client follow-ups and the framed picture of Dad again. Leona thought she was clever. She thought she could steal what I built and turn it into some Pinterest dream with lavender-scented business cards. The next morning, I met with Miriam at her downtown office. She looked sharp as ever in a charcoal suit, her glasses perched low on her nose as she reviewed the latest stack of documents. We've got enough to build a solid fraud case, she said, tapping the papers. But if we want a slam dunk, we need more. Something that connects her directly to the money, preferably in her handwriting, or with her signature. What if, I said slowly, we gave her something to sign? Miriam raised an eyebrow. Go on. She wants to expand the business. She thinks she's some kind of creative visionary. If I suggest a collaborative expansion plan and ask her to sign off on it, financial projections, partner roles, all that, we might get her to commit her intentions on paper. Miriam smiled. You mean set a trap? A soft one, I replied. One she'll walk into happily. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I sent Leona emails with bubbly subject lines like excited to build together. And let's chat growth. I drafted a 10-page proposal filled with fluff, branding strategy, influencer outreach, sustainable packaging, all the nonsense I knew she loved. And buried deep in the appendix, a financial partnership clause stating that she had personally withdrawn funds without written approval, which would need to be acknowledged and rectified by reinvestment or relinquishment of expansion rights. I ran it by Miriam twice. It won't hold up as a contract on its own, she warned, but if she signs it, it proves intent. That's what we need. So I set the bait. Leona arrived at our meeting in high spirits, wearing a pink blazer and carrying a vision board, an actual corkboard covered in magazine cutouts. I nearly lost it when I saw #BossBabeEnergy scrawled across the top. Val, she said, hugging me like we were in a rom-com, this is going to be so epic. I feel like we're finally aligning. Me too, I lied smoothly. I worked on some notes based on what you've mentioned. We went through the slides together. She nodded enthusiastically at everything. When we reached the final section, I handed her the summary document with a pen. If you're good with this outline, I said, just sign here so we can loop in the legal team and kick things off. She didn't even skim it. She signed with a flourish. Boom, she said. Let's build an empire. I smiled. We just might. After she left, I scanned the document and sent it to Miriam immediately. We got her. Miriam called 10 minutes later. This is perfect. It's not about locking her into a business deal. It's about proving she acknowledged those withdrawals and the fraud. Now the wheels were in motion. By the end of the week, Miriam had gathered enough evidence to submit our full case file, forged documents, financial misappropriation, notarized statements, and now, Leona's own signed acknowledgement. We filed for a formal business separation with full ownership reclamation. Then came the notice to Leona. We served her at her apartment. According to the process server, she screamed at the door and threw the envelope back, but she kept it. The next day, she showed up at the office. What the hell is this, Valerie? She barked, waving the letter. You should read it. It's all pretty clear. You tricked me into signing something. You signed your own words. If you had read it, you'd know. Her hands were shaking. You think this is going to hold up? I'm your sister. This is personal. No, I said, standing my ground. This is business. And you made it that way the moment you forged my name. She looked around the office like she expected someone to back her up, but no one did. Ben had seen the paperwork. The team had felt the tension for weeks. They knew who had built this place. That evening, I stopped by Mom's house. She opened the door wearing her usual soft cardigan and a look that made my stomach knot. Valerie, your sister is in pieces, she said instead of hello. Of course she was. She should be, I replied calmly. She said you're accusing her of stealing from the company. No, Mom. I'm not accusing her. I have proof. Forged signatures. A money trail. Witnesses. Mom flinched, but I wasn't done. She didn't just steal from me. She broke the law. But your sisters, Mom said quietly. Family should forgive. I shook my head. Family shouldn't exploit each other. She looked away, and for once, didn't argue. It was the smallest shift, but a shift nonetheless. When I left, I sat in my car a long time, hands on the steering wheel, trying to sort through the mess of emotions churning in my chest. Hurt. Anger. Sadness. But beneath it all, a rising sense of resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about setting the record straight. It was about taking back what was mine. And Leona. She was going to learn the hard way what it felt like to be on the receiving end of consequences she thought would never touch her. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit was formally filed in county court. I remember sitting outside the courthouse, staring up at the glass doors, heart hammering in my chest. Miriam, cool and composed, handed me a copy of the filing. "It's official," she said. "Leona has been served." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Leona went radio silent, but her tantrum erupted elsewhere, voicemails from my mother, texts from distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, and a bizarre email from Rachel claiming I was destroying the family legacy out of jealousy. Mom invited me over that weekend, under the guise of Sunday dinner. I should have known better. When I walked in, Leona was already there, red-eyed but dressed like she was giving a TED Talk. "This needs to stop," Mom said firmly, setting a casserole dish down like it was a peace offering. "It will," I replied. "Once the court rules." Leona leaned forward. "Val, you're ruining our family's name. We can fix this together, I swear. No more legal stuff. We'll just go back to before." "Before what?" I asked. "Before you forged my signature. Before you emptied our accounts for your startup fantasies." Mom cut in, her voice pleading. "Girls, please. Don't let this destroy everything your father built. Family doesn't belong in court." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. Just clarity. Dad built a business. I saved it. Leona tried to steal it. The court is the only reason she hasn't burned it to the ground. Leona stood, fists clenched. "You're heartless." I stood too. "No. I'm done being the doormat." The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. The courtroom was small, but packed, local business owners, old friends of my dad's, even a few clients who'd caught wind of the drama. It was humiliating. But I held my head high. Miriam opened with a clean, fact-based argument. She walked the judge through the timeline, the forged signature, the suspicious transfers, the fake notary connection. She laid out our evidence methodically, with clarity and calm. Then came Leona's turn. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a naive little sister, swept up in grief and misunderstanding. He argued that my father had always wanted his daughters to co-own the business, that Leona had simply tried to honor that wish. And Leona. She cried. Real tears, smeared mascara, trembling hands, the whole performance. She told the court she'd been trying to save the business with her vision, that I'd frozen her out, that I was jealous of her creativity. But then Miriam brought out the signed expansion plan. The document with Leona's signature, admitting to unauthorized financial decisions. "Did you read this before signing?" Miriam asked. Leona hesitated. "I trusted my sister." "So you acknowledge that your signature is on this document?" "Yes, but..." No further questions. Miriam sat, and I exhaled. When the judge called for a recess, I stepped outside for air. Ben followed. "You're killing it in there," he said. "Everyone can see the truth." I nodded, but I wasn't celebrating yet. Not until the verdict. It came the next day. The judge ruled the ownership transfer invalid due to forgery and lack of proper consent. He acknowledged Leona's deception and manipulation, and ordered full ownership of the business to be returned to me. I sat in stunned silence as he spoke. Not because I didn't believe it, but because for the first time in months, I felt safe. Leona's face was unreadable. She didn't cry this time. She just stood and walked out of the courtroom. Mom didn't speak to me that day. I knew she needed time. Maybe she would come around. Maybe not. But I was done bending myself to protect people who only saw me as useful. Outside, Miriam squeezed my arm. You did it. It's over. I smiled. Not quite. But we're getting there. Because even though the court gave me back my business, Leona's damage hadn't disappeared. She had burned bridges. Left financial messes. Poisoned vendor relationships. Cleaning that up would take time. But at least now, I could do it on my terms. The first thing I did after the verdict was change the locks. It wasn't symbolic, it was necessary. Leona still had keys, and even though the court had stripped her of ownership, I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I had the security system upgraded, passwords changed, and a full audit initiated by a third-party accountant. The place felt different. Not because of any physical change, but because I knew the chaos was behind me. Now came the rebuilding. For weeks, I worked non-stop. I met with every supplier, every vendor Leona had burned, and personally apologized. I offered better terms where I could, streamlined invoices, and reopened negotiations where necessary. Some came back immediately, loyal to me from years of honest business. Others needed time. A few were lost forever. But I could live with that. The staff, thankfully, stood by me. Ben helped restructure departments to prevent any single person from having unchecked control, including myself. We implemented new checks and balances, better record keeping, and a rotating audit schedule. It was exhausting, but oddly refreshing. And through it all, I didn't hear a word from Leona. I did, however, hear from everyone else. It started with an article in a small local business newsletter. Someone had leaked the court documents, and while they didn't name names, anyone familiar with our business could piece it together. Then came the whispers on social media. A vague post from Rachel about betrayal and censorship. A TikTok that a former intern made, summarizing the scandal like a soap opera. People started reaching out, not out of malice, but curiosity. Long-lost high school friends, old co-workers, even a few cousins I hadn't seen in a decade. Most messages read the same. I can't believe your sister did that. You didn't deserve it. One day I went to a networking event, hesitant but needing the exposure, and a woman I barely knew offered to buy me a drink. You're Valerie Rowan, right? Good for you. That took guts. I smiled, accepted the drink, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. But the fallout at home was different. Colder. Mom never called. Never texted. No apology. Just silence. I knew she was embarrassed. She'd backed the wrong horse. Defended Leona all the way until the verdict. And when the truth was undeniable, she folded into herself rather than face it. I sent her a birthday card, simple and polite. She didn't respond. Eventually, I stopped trying. Some rifts are too wide to repair. Especially when only one person is reaching across. And Leona. From what I gathered, she was living in another city now. Trying to rebrand herself as a creative consultant. Word got around quickly though, and a few of her gigs fell through once clients did their research. One vendor even forwarded me a desperate email she'd sent under a different name. The mask had slipped. That was her burden to carry now. Not mine. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my newly renovated office, watching the team collaborate in our updated conference room. We'd just landed our largest event coordination contract yet, something that required months of planning and strategy. It was hard. It was stressful. But it was mine. That afternoon, I had coffee scheduled with a potential new partner, a logistics expert named Nadia. She came highly recommended and was looking for a small, values-driven company to collaborate with. She arrived early, crisp white blazer, confident handshake. "I read about your story," she said, no hesitation. "It's impressive. Not the drama, the way you handled it." I didn't flinch. It was a test. One I didn't ask for. But it taught me a lot. We talked for over an hour, about market trends, supply chain issues, risk management. She was smart. Driven. Focused. As she stood to leave, she looked me in the eye. "You've got grit, Valerie. That's rare. I'd be lucky to work with you." That night, I locked up the office alone. I turned off the lights, checked the doors, and paused in the lobby. There was a photo on the wall now, just me, in front of the building, the day after the trial. A new chapter. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying someone else's weight. I had my business. I had my peace. And I would never, never, let anyone take that from me again.